I'd say about 90% of the time, video game journalists are completely out of touch with how gamers feel. They need us to read their articles, yet they constantly belittle us any given time they can. And now, of course, Paul Tassi is being called out for his true blue hypocrisy because back at the beginning of the year, he said Stellar Blade is now one of the highest user scored PS5 games ever, which is a bit excessive, but now he's praising it, saying one of 2024's best games is finally on sale. I have a few different things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, Paul Tassi is one of the last video game journalists that I would ever trust. I do not like him. I don't like a lot of his takes, but he could at least be consistent in his stances. And of course, when Stellar Blade had released, there was a lot of meltdowns going on, and there still is because they just launched the Stellar Blade Near Automata collab. There's been quite a few outlets that have been freaking out over this, and they've even tried to twist the situation by saying, oh, because you can't look up Eve in 2B's skirt and she kicks you away, that's the developers trying to own the chuds, that they're trying to attack the perverts and curb inappropriate behavior, which is not the case. It's just simply a reference to the Nier games, and plenty of Japanese games over the years have done it. Same with a title like Lollipop Chainsaw. It's just supposed to be a fun little addition when you look up a character's skirt too many times, but they've tried to paint a narrative that, oh my god, it's to curb inappropriate behavior, which is fucking ridiculous. But, of course, these people are shills. They are not to be trusted. And now Paul Tassi is getting called out because of his most recent article. Now, back when this game released, he had written this article, of course, over on Forbes, titled Stellar Blade is now the highest user scored PS5 game ever, which is a bit excessive, saying Stellar Blade continues its cycle of discourse that alternates between culture wars and actual examination of the game's quality, and now it's hit a very unexpected high watermark combining both of those. He talks about how, as it stands, Stellar Blade is the highest user scored PS5 game of the entire generation on Metacritic, which is fucking mind-blowing given it wasn't actually nominated for Game of the Year, even though basically everybody who played it loved it. That just goes to show why you should not actually watch all of these award ceremonies, because at the end of the day, the jury list is filled with outlets like Kotaku, IGN, Polygon, The Gamer, and this year they actually hid the jury list because they didn't want those people getting called out on their BS, but it says elevating it above its strong but not stunning 82 Metascore from critics. Yeah, I personally don't ever really look at the critics scores unless it's just to compare it to the users. It's currently at a 9.2 out of 10, which, yes, does tie it with Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition and Resident Evil 4 Separate Ways expansion. I really enjoyed Stellar Blade. Of course, the sexy element is really cool, don't get me wrong, and as a woman, I feel much more empowered seeing a sexy female protagonist versus a Gorlock the Destroyer looking one, the Crimson Shins that we get in modern AAA video games like K-Vess or the Concord character designs, literally any of them. But it had more to it than just sexy characters. The gameplay was fantastic. I loved the boss fights and the variations. There was a lot of really cool costumes, a lot of depth to the characters. The world was pretty good, and the soundtrack was phenomenal. One of the best soundtracks I've heard in a very long time. But, of course, that's not good enough. He says that those scores are far too high. Now, he does actually talk about how he gave the game a solid 8 out of 10, and he enjoyed it, so yes, that is true, but he put up this article saying the scores were excessive and used it as an entry point to attack gamers and anyone who is on the opposite side of the culture war from him. He goes on to say, and yet I can't help but acknowledge that some of this is due to the culture war angle here, so opinion instantly discarded. You can't just let people actually enjoy a game without coming up with some excuse that, oh my god, it's just culture war people that are giving it good scores. That's definitely not the case. It deserves a very high score, but now he's actually changed his tune quite a bit, saying it's one of 2024's best games, and it's finally on sale, even though he did his very best when this game came out to put out hit pieces on it to attack it and attack the very people who were giving it these high scores that were making it one of the highest rated games of the year. And he hasn't defended this game at any other point except for saying, oh, hey, well, I gave it an 8 out of 10, even though I think the other scores are too excessive. No, you just think that they're excessive because they're higher than what you rated it. Across the board, people really enjoyed this game. You did to a certain extent too, but now he's getting called out for it. So I had made this X thread saying the duality of journos, and people are pointing and laughing. Nuri said they really behave like the internet has a 3-second memory or something. It's so true. Why do they think that we have forgotten about their previous attitude, previous articles they've written, or if they're a content creator on YouTube, videos they've put up? I mean, there are plenty of times where I am wrong on my channel, but I never remove those videos. I do not really delete posts unless, of course, I have to edit something and add more context, or I mistyped and it wouldn't let me edit it, things that are small like that. But generally, when I have an opinion, I do not delete it. And I guess I have to give him some credit for not removing this article either. But on the flip side, it's like they think that we will just magically forget and that a couple months later they can change their tune and nobody will really notice or call them out, which certainly isn't the case. AI Emerald said Paul Tassi is just another wind vane journalist. Now that the wind is blowing against DEI, he is going against it. How long until he starts wearing a MAGA hat? I don't think that he would ever go that far. His opinions definitely are pretty radical. He's, of course, allowed to have them, but it just, to me, screams desperation, right? These journalists have realized that they are losing the power that they once had, that content creators on YouTube are becoming the mainstream media. We are the ones that are getting millions and millions of views every single month, every single day, in some cases, for some content creators, which is fantastic, and they can only dream of getting those numbers. So what do they have to do? They have to attack people in order to try to grasp onto the little bit of power that they still have, but all they're doing is making themselves look ridiculous. Putting out hit pieces, trying to get those hate clicks, and then changing your tune to try to get the clicks of people who actually love the content. It's just so absurd, at least in my opinion. Best ever and best of the year are very different. There could be a sizable gap between those two groups depending on a ton of factors. This is only a contradiction if you just really want it to be. I personally disagree. I'm not saying that this is the best game ever. Nobody is saying that this is the best game ever. I'm not even saying that it's the best of the year. In my opinion, it still deserved to be nominated for Game of the Year like last year with Hogwarts Legacy. I don't think that it was the best game of the year. Final Fantasy 16 was my personal pick, but I still thought it deserved to be nominated. Same here. And nobody's saying that Paul thinks it's the best game ever, but he went from trying to attack it at the beginning of the year in April when it released, saying, oh, the scores are a bit excessive, to saying it's one of the best titles of the year. And because over the past few days we've seen meltdowns by journals, I'm actually a bit surprised that he decided to put up this piece saying it's one of 2024's best games just because so many others are attacking the title right now and also attacking gamers. But it's still Paul Tassi. It still shows his hypocrisy. I can't sit here and give him too much credit, so I will be keeping my eye on this to see if he puts out any sort of clarification. But while he gave it an 8 out of 10 initially, it was still an entry point to attack gamers over the culture war, and it was a hit piece to get those hate clicks in April. Now he's putting up this piece to get, clicks from gamers who love the title, and I can't sit here and say that I'm shocked. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next video really soon.